Great to see everybody coming in. What we like to do with these types of forums and stuff like that is introduce ourselves in chat. There's going to be, looks like a lot of people coming in, so we'll do it that way. I'll wait for just a second to share. I'll wait till the top of the hour to share mine, but basically who you are, anything you want us to know about you, if that's what you do, that kind of, your job, your interests, whatever, that kind of stuff. But then also we like to get an idea of whether we're covering all the time zones in the US or beyond. So if you could include where you're calling in from as well. Share mine. Of course, I typed a novel to drop into chat, but those of you just coming in, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please do so in chat. Let us know who you are, anything you want us to know about you, and where you're calling in from. It's the top of the hour. Normally on some of these things, I like to give people a minute or two to continue to join us, but nobody really needs to hear me talk. So I'll start. It's great to have everybody join us for this forum on applying CBPR methods within substance use research. We're really excited. We put together this toolkit. It was a humongous effort, really big team, was amazing. And we're just super excited to kind of launch this, introduce some of the topics to y'all today, and have a lively Q&A discussion. So, if you have questions as you go along, drop them in the chat, and then we'll have a Q&A section after we talk at you for a little while. Ashley, you want to take it away?
Yeah, thank you all for being here today. We are excited to talk about community-based participatory research, or CBPR for short. We'll be using that terminology throughout. I'll set the stage for us, and then we'll have 4 pairs of co-presenters talk through different topics. And then, as Patrick said, we're going to open it up for Q&A. So hold your questions for that part, or you're welcome to put them in the chat in the meantime, and then we can circle back to them. We also recognize that many of you have wonderful insights and advice to share. So please share your thoughts and ideas in the chat or during the open Q&A portion as well. Our team at Chestnut has been very, very fortunate over the past few years to partner directly with community boards in our work using CBPR. And this has been across several different projects. This next slide here is going to list those on the screen. Today's forum is co-sponsored by JEAP, CHEER, and PATH, which are all NIDA funded. We're not going to talk a lot about those projects in particular.
Community-based.
Sorry about that. So we're not going to talk a lot about those projects. They're all NIDA funded, but Keone is going to put links in the chat if you want to learn more about any of those particular projects. We've learned a ton along the way through these partnerships that we've had with community boards. We've learned how to make research projects better and stronger and more relevant, but also we've learned a lot about how to effectively have these kinds of partnerships. And to be honest, sometimes that learning has come from mistakes. And we try to work and continually improve as we have moved along. And then over time, we began to have other research projects reach out to us with questions like, what type of language do you use when recruiting board members who are in recovery? What do you need to budget for when including community boards in a grant proposal? And how do you measure how that partnership is going? So we'd send examples and information via email. Sometimes we'd hop on a Zoom call to talk through these things. We also started presenting at conferences about our lessons learned, and the rooms were always full with a lot of discussion. So over the past year, we created a toolkit to try to cover those common questions that we get about doing CBPR and substance use research. We know there are a lot of great resources out there. Some of you I see on the screen may have been co-authors or helped to put some of those resources out there. So our focus is really on the nuts and bolts of how you actually do this and giving really concrete examples. The toolkit wound up being 200 pages long. So today we are giving just a taste of some of the topics. This is not a training session, but rather we're just giving you the flavor of what the toolkit includes. So please take the time to dive into the full toolkit afterward. And Keone is going to put just put the link in the chat. So when you open that page, just click on the dark blue box to access the toolkit. So on the next slide, we'll display a list of what's in the table of contents. This is just so you get a sense of the different chapters, and hopefully you see things that are particularly relevant to what you're working on now, so you can check out those after today's session. Also, the appendix has lots of examples, such as sample recruitment emails, questions to ask during the application process, example board meeting agendas, and more. And while we have that up for people to peruse, we are also going to launch a short poll, because I'd love to get a quick sense from the room today of where people are at with experiences for when it comes to partnerships with community boards. So if you can take a minute to fill that in, maybe just a few seconds. Click what's right for you, and then we'll share the overall results with the group. Give it just another second. And it's probably slowed down by now. So Keone, are you able to share the results? Awesome. Are they getting shared? I'm not seeing them yet.
Yep, it says it's actively sharing, but let me know if other people can see that too.
I see it off on the side.
Okay, awesome. So it looks like we're sort of in the middle of having some experience. Most of the group is in that having some experience or wanting to build on that, but then also a good chunk with that don't have any experience and want to learn more. And there's a slew there, a few that have a lot of experience. And so I hope that everyone will, our goal is for us to learn and get better together. So for those of you who have knowledge or experience, please share that as we go through in the chat or during the Q&A section. So let's move on to the next slide. Our goal for ourselves and for other researchers in the field is to strive for the highest quality of community engaged research that's feasible at this moment. And that may vary a lot on things like resources and experience or other things. I think this image that Key and colleagues, they did a great job of describing this as a continuum with no community involvement at one extreme, so research that's on people versus with people. And then at the other end, community-driven and led research. That would be research that's initiated by community members with little to no researcher support. So our group's hope is that as a field, we keep learning and finding opportunities to move further toward that community-driven end of the continuum, knowing that any movement you can make towards that is good progress. So we're not setting the bar up here at the very end. We really just want folks to move as far along that continuum as they can. So with that in mind, today we're talking specifically about genuine partnerships with community boards. So it's sort of that community-based participatory research section that you see on the slide there. So we're talking about that sort of partnership. But a lot of what we'll share today is applicable to other types of collaborations with people with lived experience as well. Also, a quick note that we use the name Community Board rather than Community Advisory Board or CAB that some folks may be familiar with. Either is a fine term, and we explain in the toolkit about our rationale for using Community Board instead of advisory. It's because of our emphasis on that CBPR level of partnership and that shared decision making that comes along with that. But this is simply the preference of our team. Either term, we're meaning the same thing. Another important piece is that as thinking about who's on your research team itself, we're focusing on bringing in perspectives from outside the team in the form of community boards, but I always try to highlight this point that the team itself is another opportunity to center the voices of people with lived experience. For several years, all the positions on our team, everything from research assistant up through postdoctoral fellowships and beyond, all of those positions have had a preferred qualification for individuals with indirect or direct lived experience. And we've done legwork to try to attract staff who bring those perspectives and expertise and to support that as part of our team. So that's one point I wanted to make. And then I also wanted to mention that in this toolkit, we highlight two priority populations because our research has focused on those populations. So it's who we have experience partnering with, and those are emerging adults, and then individuals of any age who have criminal legal system involvement. And now I'm going to hand it over to our other presenters, our other experts. We have community board members and research team members who are co-presenting on different sections of information. Each of them are going to introduce themselves, and then as I mentioned afterwards, we'll have that Q&A section. The forum is being recorded so that it can be shared afterwards, but if you want your question to be read anonymously, feel free to send that message in a direct message to Keone, and Keone can have it read out. So thank you all again for being here today, and Ariel and Michelle are up next.
All right. Well, we can introduce ourselves briefly. My name is Michelle Cruz, and I'm a research project manager at Chestnut Health Systems, the Lighthouse Institute, and based in Eugene, Oregon. And I'm joined by Ariel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ariel Estes. I wear a lot of hats, but my favorite hat is being someone with lived experience. I work at Rutgers GBHC, and I'm a social work student at Rutgers University.
Yeah. And in our section, we're going to be talking about some of the preliminary planning for community engagement that happens at the stage of writing the grant application. So before the project has even been funded and before it started. So we can go to the next slide. Yeah, and so first we're going to talk about the importance of being really clear about the goal for the community board from the get-go. So Ariel, I'll let you take us away on that.
Okay, so for me, like when you set goals for why you're engaging with people with lived experience, to me, like clarity is everything. Is the goal to shape how like recruitment is done? Is it dissemination? Is it to refine the language and consent forms? For example, like I helped co-create a toolkit with both researchers and community members at the table. That wasn't just giving feedback, it was building something together. And that kind of collaboration makes the work more grounded and useful for the people it's meant to serve. It's also key to ask, like, who do we need at this table? Is it parents? Is it caregivers? Is it people who use medication-assisted treatment or, medication for opioid use disorder? Is it people who have lived experience? Is it people with living experience? Or communities who are often just left out? Defining both the goals and the populations help prevent tokenism and ensures that like input is meaningful.
We can go to the next slide. Good. And so it's good to be clear on everyone's roles within the collaboration. And as you all know, researchers are spearheading the research project, staff are supporting the research and also supporting the functioning of the community board. And it's really helpful, as Ariel was saying, to be clear about the role of community board members. So she's going to dive into that piece a little more.
I think the biggest thing after being on like many, what I like to call them community advisory boards, that we're just not participants, like we're partners. And that distinction really does matter. I've been in spaces where lived experience input was asked for, but the decisions were already made. That's tokenizing. By contrast, though, when my voice actually shaped the design or the language, like our toolkit, I felt like a true partner. Board members bring expertise both personally and professionally, and honoring that keeps engagement authentic.
All right, we can go to next slide. So later, when we talk about orientation for board members, we're going to talk about what type of information and training might be helpful for board members who are coming into a collaboration. But it's also important for the research team, so both the researcher and staff, to do some prep work to prepare for this collaboration. And at this early stage of writing the grant for the project, it's helpful to already be thinking about this so that in the grant, you can be describing what expertise your team has already and what expertise you're going to build on and what type of training you all might do, as this project proceeds. And so some of these pieces might look like getting more training on CBPR itself. So coming to trainings like this, engaging with resources online. We've listed a number of CBPR related resources in the toolkit appendix. So we've got some things there, some that are free, some with a cost that you can find available to you. Also, it might be doing trainings related to implicit bias, right? That in our interactions with different folks, it can influence that in ways that we don't realize. Or it could be trainings related to language or just learning more about the community that you're planning to partner with. And so, Ariel, I'll hand it over to you to dive into those pieces.
So like Michelle said, like training isn't just for the community members, researchers obviously need preparation too. I know for me, one of the biggest areas is in language. I work with a lot of pregnant women who are using during their pregnancy or on a medication for opioid disorder. So words like addicted baby don't fly in communities like that. You really have to read the room and get to know that community. Because we notice when research teams take the time to learn respectful, accurate language, that effort builds trust. And beyond language, being open to learning about the community matters. That can mean like following, listening to community podcasts, following, the community on TikTok, or just showing up to events, not just reading academic articles. It shows you're willing to meet people where they are.
Okay, next slide. One of our key steps early on is budgeting for community engaged work. And the administrative pieces of this whole process, like independent contractor agreements or processing stipend payments, might not be the most exciting part of this collaboration, but they do really matter. And in our experience, what we found is that when done well, these types of things can help build trust and get the partnership off on the right foot. And when done poorly, they can turn partners off before the work even starts. And so that's why we sweat these small details, like avoiding having a 10-page contract full of a bunch of legal jargon for community board members to sign, that might, kind of put someone off before you even get going on the work together. And so we try to keep these processes centered on building the partnership. And so when you're budgeting for community board members' stipends, you'll need to decide the number of members you're planning to have and how often they'll be meeting. So some considerations for that is we don't want a board that's too small where you're missing out on different perspectives, but also we don't want too big that it's kind of unwieldy with the group. You also want to think about, as Ariel was talking about, like these different populations you're trying to engage. Does it make sense to have a single board, or is it really kind of like very different groups of people and different perspectives you're trying to hear from? And so does it make more sense that they're separated into two or more separate boards? In our experience, we've typically had between 8 to 11 members per board, and that's typically worked well. And a lot of times we'll budget for a certain number and then recruit maybe 1 or 2 people beyond that, because we know that attendance is going to fluctuate and it's not typically 100% at every single meeting. And then with your frequency of meetings, that will be driven a lot by the activities within your project and what the flow of those is and when board members are going to be more involved. Typically early on, having more frequent meetings is helpful just to get momentum going, help build that trust, get people into the flow of the project. And then if possible, if you're able to budget for any in-person meetings, if it's a virtual board or conference travel, we found that to be really beneficial for board members and really appreciate it when we've been able to do that. Okay, and then Ariel, let you jump into our other pieces.
I think payments should be very straightforward. I've seen people offer gift cards, but sometimes those can't pay like rent or bills. And excluding different offers can feel dismissive to some. Flexibility in scheduling is another huge sign of respect. If meetings are only during work hours, if it shuts out parents, people working shifts, or anyone without childcare. Budgeting for transportation, childcare, or meals may seem small, but it makes participation possible. And one example that really stuck with me when I served on a particular board that included moms who had used substances during their pregnancy. And even though we were spread across the country, they made sure we could all order pizza during meetings. And it was those small things. It sounds simple, but it made us feel valued, and we were able to connect and participate more, and it kept us engaged. So those small gestures can make a huge difference.
Okay, next slide, please. All right, so if you absolutely don't have a budget to compensate board members, such as if it's a pilot grant or you're an early career researcher and have really limited funds, we're going to talk about some other ways of compensating members, in lieu of having stipends. And even if you have a budget to pay for stipends, it's also helpful to think about doing some of these things anyways, because this helps to make the partnership be mutually beneficial. So this is kind of good with or without a monetary stipend in addition to that.
So even with stipends, other forms of recognition do matter. Certificates, co-authorship, recommendation letters, those validate expertise and last beyond the meeting. Personally, having my contributions recognized in toolkits, in publications, has been just as meaningful as a financial payment for me. It signals that community members are seen as true collaborators.
And some of the things that we list on here, are low cost or don't cost anything, but can mean a whole lot to folks. We have, one example that we mentioned in the toolkit is like a handwritten thank you note, right? Like that literally just costs like the cost of postage, but it could be so meaningful for someone. We have a couple examples in here. So this photo was a poster presentation where community board members were a co-author. This is Eden and Ashley from our team in the photo there. And we printed out an 11x17 paper of the poster so that people could have that as a keepsake of like this poster presentation that they're co-authors on. And for some folks, that was like super meaningful and people were excited about like this tangible reminder of what they're doing. And if we go to the next slide, I'll just point out one other example we also love doing kudo boards, which is like an online card for individual members if they've got like a major personal or professional milestone they share with us, or just at like meaningful points in the project. So this is a screenshot of a kudo board that we did where our team was signing and board members were signing to share what impact their work had. And so with that, we're going to pass it off to Keone and Kim.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I'm excited to introduce my amazing co-presenter, Kimberly Moore, and then I'll share a brief introduction about myself before we get started. So Kim is a former member of the Heal Connections Lived Experience panel and has worked in the field of substance use disorder for over 20 years, including teaching recovery classes in an all-male prison, She's a motivational speaker who shares her story around the country and has been in long-term recovery, free of all drugs, including alcohol, for more than 24 years. It's truly a pleasure to have her with us today, and I personally am really excited because I've enjoyed working alongside her throughout all of Heal Connections. So briefly about myself, my name is Keone Vermoy. I'm a part of the research team with Ashley and my other fellow co-presenters. I'm coming to this meeting with direct and indirect lived experience with substance use issues and legal system involvement, just to give you a brief glimpse of myself. And I'm the senior research project assistant for our team. I've also had so many wonderful opportunities to work closely with board members and panel members across different projects such as the JEAP Initiative, Heal Connections, and PATH. So as you can see on this slide, Kim and I will be talking about a couple different sections today for the toolkit. And let me just start by saying all of these areas are foundational for building safe, trusting, and productive partnerships with community boards. So to get us started, I'd like to turn to my co-presenter. Kim, why is it important for researchers to give people autonomy, thinking about freedom and control, and deciding how much of their personal story to share in different settings like meetings or the project website? And we can also move to the next slide.
I think it's very important, Keone. Thank you. How's everybody doing today? I'm Kimberly. It's very important to make sure that autonomy is a anonymous. I'm sorry, not anonymity. Couldn't get it out. Anonymity is extremely important when we're dealing with people, because you have to be able to have people feel comfortable about what it is that they want to say. They need to be able to make their own choices, because this is how much of my information that I want to give. Not just have it just thrown out there without getting their permission. For example, even email addresses. Or I'm talking to Keone. How much of me do I want to present? To the board. As far as like, yes, I have been in long-term recovery for over 24 years. I've worked in the field. I'm retired now for over 2 decades. Have a lot of experience, both lived experience, both with substance abuse and also incarceration. I've sponsored many, many people for many, many years, and I'm a motivational speaker. So when I'm talking to people, it's important to make sure that they feel comfortable. If a person doesn't feel comfortable and free to share what they want to share, then it's a good chance that they won't open up.
Exactly. And the idea of comfort and story ownership, these are all central to making sure that everyone feels comfortable and confident sharing as much as possible, if they want to, with the research team, fellow board members, or even guests that attend meetings. No one should have to share their story, or even the fact that they're in recovery or have legal system involvement, without explicit permission. It's also important to be transparent from the beginning. During recruitment, explain what level of anonymity is possible. Some may want their name and photo public, while others may not, as we can see in this quote. Frequently asked questions web page on your recruitment web page, if you have one, can also help clarify this. And then there's the explicit permission. If a member might be relevant for an opportunity, always ask before sharing their information. So think of online profiles or even co-presenting at a forum. Give them full control over their disclosure. So Kim, thinking about privacy in some more detail, how might the sharing of your name or email publicly without your consent impact your personal life or even just trust among the research team?
If you share my information publicly without my consent, I will feel totally violated. I would feel like my privacy had been violated. I don't know who's getting this information or what they're going to do with the information. My trust at that point will be completely up. The wall will go up. I will feel at that point that I can't share anything with you. Now I want to close down. I want to shut down, because anything I say can and will be used against you in court of law. I would feel, Ariel. I'll be like, oh no. Like, I don't want to say anything, because girl, it might end up on the front page somewhere, and then my kids might see it, or my grandkids may see it, or my boss might see it, or my coworkers. I don't know who's gonna see this information. And then someone may come up to me, oh, hey, I heard that you were, oh my So it's completely, it will really break the trust of anybody, not just me.
Thank you. So protecting privacy prevents harm and preserves trust, as we've just talked about. Although the information of board members is not research data, we recommend treating it with the same level of sensitivity. That means using secure storage and sharing certain information on a need-to-know basis across the team. So for those of you who are interested in hosting board meetings virtually, we've also had great success with Zoom. While Zoom provides many settings to improve security, these options have proven to be the most useful for our team. So thinking about creating a waiting room, admitting people at different times during the meeting, updating Zoom on a regular basis, and also recording meetings and uploading them to the clouds. Okay, so we can go on to the next section, which is going to talk about guardrails and community guidelines. So some meetings we held included a short period after the main call where guests left, leaving only the panel, leaving only community board members. And our next co-presenters will talk about that in some more detail in a moment. So for now, let me just touch on guardrails in general. So examples could include sharing only what members are comfortable with, respecting anonymity, honoring self-chosen language, and promoting non-stigmatizing communication. Guidelines should also foster trust among board members, and early co-creation helps members feel ownership. It builds transparency and makes conflict resolution easier. So as we can see on the slide right now, if you look on the right-hand side with the sticky notes, this is just an example of what we've used in the past. We'll normally create a loose idea of some guidelines. We'll then share that to board members ahead of time. And then during our first board meeting, we'll have a discussion where people can add sticky notes to our virtual board and talk about that in more detail. So Kim, thinking about just comfort in general, what's one thing that makes you feel comfortable speaking up during full panel meetings or just in any board meeting in general?
I'm comfortable when I know who's in the meeting. You know what I'm saying? I'm comfortable when like when I first came here with getting introduced to you guys, right? To hear you introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about yourself. I gave Keone an example of that. Like I remember, years ago when I went into treatment. I don't mind sharing this. I went into treatment and I had checked myself in. I just really wanted to change my life, right? And I'm sitting there with a counselor with her degrees on her walls and the letters behind her name, and she starts talking to me about her degrees and dopamine and this and the other and how it affects the brain. And I'm sitting there and I am like I'm desperate for help. And so I asked her, have you ever used drugs before? And she said, no, but I have a degree in this. And all of a sudden it sounds like Charlie Brown, womp, womp, womp. Like I couldn't hear nothing she was saying, Patrick, because you're never going to understand me. You don't understand what I feel, what I'm going through. I need somebody who can understand where I've been and what I felt and what I went through. And so when I come in, what makes me comfortable is knowing that someone else has similar experiences and they've opened up and made and I identify with you. And when I identify with you, I'm sitting back and I say, oh, okay, so Kim, you can breathe. It's okay. They're just like you. You don't have to feel ashamed of your past because they have a past too. And so that's what is really important when we bring people in, to let them know who we are.
Couldn't agree more. All right, so we can go ahead and move on to the next slide really quick. And I'll just briefly touch on this as one different approach that you can take if you have conflict management. This isn't the end all be all. There's a ton of different options out there. This is something that's worked well for us. So this is called the ouch and oops method. This is just a great way to acknowledge harm if it happens during a meeting and to move forward constructively as a team. And with that, we can go ahead and move on to the next slide. All right, so when thinking about board member recruitment, the first step is identifying the type of expertise needed for your project. For instance, we encourage you to determine what type of criteria all community board members will need to meet. So if your work focuses on the criminal legal system, do you need the community board members to have that type of lived experience as well? And what aspects of that do you need? So Are you looking specifically for people on probation, people in incarceration? Are you looking at adult populations, juvenile? A bunch of things to consider. You'll also want to consider balance. So who needs a seat at the table and which groups might be missing? Diverse voices are important, but it's also helpful if members share some common experiences. This combination fosters both inclusive insights and a sense of safety. So, Kim, thinking about safety in general, why do you think it's important for researchers to identify clear requirements for serving on the board?
We need clear requirements for participation so that we can narrow down what it is that we're looking for, or someone can say, like myself, right? You can say, well, we want someone who has worked in the field. Okay, that would be me. I've worked in the field, but we also want somebody who's worked in the field that is in long-term recovery. Oh, okay, I qualify for that too. Oh, we also want someone who has worked in the field, have long-term recovery, and also has some experience in the judicial system. Oh, I fit all three of those. So now I feel more comfortable. Now I know what it is where I fit. If you came in and I saw the criteria was someone who has been on parole, for example, then I know that would not, I've never been on parole. So it's important to be clear so that people that come in can get in where they fit in.
Exactly. And so thinking about every individual in general, specifically individuals with criminal legal system involvement, these individuals have critical perspectives. Tools like what we see on the PowerPoint slide can help illustrate how people with mental and substance use disorders move through the justice system and where gaps or opportunities exist. And I'm just going to put in a quick link in case you'd like to learn more about that in particular. Thinking about another priority population that Ashley touched on earlier, emerging adults. These individuals experience many life transitions at once. If partnering with them, carefully consider eligibility criteria. For example, the age range for emerging adults may vary across studies. Some people typically start at between the ages of 16 and 18, and on the other end of the spectrum, they could have the age range ending between between 25 and 28. And so thinking about recruitment in general, a candidate's first impression comes from recruitment materials. And the next two slides, which we'll show in a minute, will give you some insight on certain items we've highlighted in the past. So you can go ahead and move to the next slide. Thinking more broadly about recruitment in general, a few items for you to consider could include creating a visually appealing logo, a landing web page with project information and the application link, a short email blurb, a brief video or infographic, talking about requirements on the website, as we can see on this slide, and also the next one are also helpful too. Going to drop in a couple of resources in case people would like to learn more about specifics that we've used in the past. So thinking about recruitment in general, Kim, from your perspective, how can researchers show they're genuinely committed to community voices during recruitment?
I believe that the commitment comes with the communication, with the listening, Keone. It's one thing when you're recruiting and you're the one doing all the talking, but you're not hearing anything that I have to say. So I have to feel comfortable. Like I need to know that smiling is so important. When you're talking to me, it's so important to say my name, to make me feel comfortable, make me feel heard, to maybe even ask me my opinion on the board. What do you think about that? So in order you have to. So many times it's been where we're talked to, or we're talked about, and this is why I love this program so much because we're in the conversation. You're talking with us, not to us. And so that's so important when it comes to recruitment because I need to be able to, because this is such a delicate subject for someone with my background. It's very delicate. There's a lot of people that will not step forward. They're not going to do it. because they're out of fear of being judged, out of fear of information getting out that they don't want to get out, all these other things that's going on. I remember that this one particular person I'm thinking about actually he's a judge here in the Dallas area, but he goes to the same program, plus the program that I go to. But it's important that when he comes in, that he knows that he's being seen equally. That we're talking with him, we're not talking like we're scared to talk to him because he's gonna put us in jail. No, what I'm saying? It's like we have to be able to make a person feel real comfortable. In order to do that, you got to smile. You got to say the person's name. You got to ask them, what do you think, and make them feel real comfortable.
Thanks, Kim. Danielle, we can fast forward the next 2 slides. It's kind of same information over 2 slides, just so that y'all know. So thinking about our application selection process, this gives you a quick overview of how we've done it in the past. Regardless of who's selected, send a follow-up email to everyone confirming that you've received their application. Closing the loop is a core CBPR principle, and it helps prevent candidates from wondering about their application status in the future. You also need to decide whether applications will be online, in print, or both, and collect essential demographic information first, then ask open-ended questions to learn more about the candidate's interests and perspectives. All right, you can go ahead and move forward. So again, this kind of just touches on a couple different ideas to keep in mind. We can go forward one more. All right, so thank you everyone for your time. And with that, I'll pass it over to our next presenters, Ren and Eden.
Hi, everyone. Before I introduce myself, I'd love to pass it to my co-presenter and give her an opportunity to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brenda Huerta, although a lot of people know me as Ren. I'm coming to you today as a person with direct and indirect lived experience with substance use, as well as the legal system. I've been on the Youth Community Board for JEAP for approximately a year now, and my desire to have been on the board in the first place was due to what I've just said, as well as now an interest and passion for addiction research and health equity. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be here to speak today.
Awesome. Thank you, Ren, for being a co-presenter with me today. My name is Eden Buell, and I bring both direct and indirect lived experience to most of the work that we do. I serve as a project coordinator with Chestnut Health Systems, and I'm also a Bloomberg Fellow through the Bloomberg American Health Initiative at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. And I am fortunate to be on several of the projects, including JEAP, CHEER, and I was also part of HEAL. And with that, Ren and I are excited to dive into the chapters today. So next slide. Awesome. So for this slide, we're going to talk about onboarding and orientation, which is really about creating a welcoming environment, one where people feel comfortable asking questions and speaking up. We always emphasize that it is important. It's an informal space, as well as advise everyone that they can share as much or as little as they want. And we also really emphasize how much we value lived expertise. The goal of onboarding and orientation is to make members feel supported right from the start. So introductions are also really important. We make sure everyone has a chance to introduce who they are, and we encourage first names to minimize the power dynamics. We also provide a clear overview of the project. So what is it about, the goals, how members will be directly involved, being transparent about funding, timelines, and what happens with findings helps build trust and ensures everyone knows how their voice will shape the work that we're doing. And on the slide, you'll see a wonderful quote that Brenda, aka Ren, shared with us. And with that in mind, I'd love to turn it to her. And from Ren, from your perspective, what has been the most helpful research? What has been most helpful for the research team to include in the onboarding and orientation process so that new members feel supported, confident, and ready to contribute?
Thanks, Eden. Well, looking back, what I feel was the most helpful for the research team to have included during my orientation and onboarding process was an empathetic and passionate advocate with lived experience to lay down and foster an environment where I, as a potential community board member, felt safe to ask questions and share my experience at my own will and details behind my interest in being a part of a project like JEAP. I have had experience in the workforce prior to JEAP, so I will say that when I first heard of the JEAP initiative and kind of got involved, I had some worry due to even working with some service providers who have unfortunately had biased views towards their own clients and patients, and I did not want to enter an environment in that same way, especially considering my own background. So having people with characteristics like these during that onboarding process, be transparent of expectations and the safeguards in place for my privacy, as well as the clear existence of community board members' autonomy, are what truly made me feel secure, confident, and ready to engage. And further, the clear explanation of JEAP's mission to advance research on the efficacy of recovery supports through a partnership with community board members like myself really enhanced that feeling of value within myself and made me truly believe in my ability to add to this mission, despite whatever my background or experience may have been in addiction. Highlighting that partnership where there were no power imbalances and established trust was crucial for me to pursue this role and engage as passionately as I have.
Well, awesome, Ren. Thank you so much for sharing that. So as you can see, orientation isn't just about sharing information. It's about building trust, clarity, and partnership right from the beginning. So next slide. So kind of what Michelle mentioned earlier, we also want to make sure that we are educating members on what research is, right? Everyone comes from a different level of experience with research. So to ensure everyone can participate fully, we provide basic research training, which helps everyone feel comfortable expressing their ideas. This training doesn't have to be overwhelming. We tailor it to the project. We focus on areas where members will be involved. We also introduce key concepts like qualitative versus quantitative research, protections, and safeguards, emphasizing the importance of the trust and transparency. And we also make sure that we are translating it in a way that everyone can understand. So while we provide the research training, we want to make sure that everyone feels confident and supported. We also emphasize that members are true experts in their lived experiences and that they're not the actual ones doing the research itself, but that they are partners in this work. So with that, Ren, would you be willing to share what your experience has been like learning about research and using your own expertise to guide the project?
Yes. I need and want to say that during this process, I was truly impressed and honestly proud of my partners on the research team at JEAP to offer community board members like myself the opportunity to have Research 101 training. I mean, despite the fact that I have a good deal of experience in research from my time at Bradley University and my time after, this action taken by my partners on the research team not only allowed me to refresh my knowledge, but to also feel really thought of, as well as my other members. For the team to remove the expectation that us as community board members may already have this knowledge and meeting us all at the beginning, despite where we may have come from or said during our interviews, it really increased my trust in others among me and really allowed more freedom to voice my thoughts without the fear of judgment or of being wrong. And this action also emphasized in me that I truly just need to be and know that I'm an expert in my experience and that is valued on this team and that I don't necessarily have to be an expert in research in my role. This has allowed me to move with more security in myself. And for that, I was really, and still am, truly grateful.
Well, thank you so much, Ren. You're so kind. Awesome. Next slide. Awesome. So one of the ways our lived experience experts feel supported is by sharing materials in advance, along with any follow-up materials as needed. So people process information differently. So we provide materials at least a week ahead, giving everyone time to review at their own pace and come prepared to the meetings. We make these preparations in different ways. So accessibility is really important. We use plain language, as I mentioned earlier, short paragraphs, visuals, and sometimes audio recordings. For longer materials, we provide additional compensation to honor that extra effort. And so with that, this brings me to my next question, Ren. Can you share what it is like for you to receive materials ahead of time and in ways that are easy for you to use? And how does that affect your ability to participate and feel valued on the board?
Yes, similarly to our partners on the research team, adding that training for them to take the initiative, to take the time to prepare and send us community members those materials ahead of time, as well as in many and various modalities, makes me as a community board member feel truly seen and genuinely cared about. This seemingly small action by my partners creates a feeling of gratitude within me, which in turn has increased my motivation and passion to purposely engage in the materials and the meetings that then would follow up further afterwards. Further, the fact that community members voice our needs and preferences with these materials and literally immediately see change makes I'd assume that all of us, because I feel truly heard and respected. I, as a community board member, had honestly never even thought of asking for the voice recordings or the visual aids, but I'm grateful that other community members did so because even I benefited from those as well. And overall, this is another initiative that has been taken that has truly made me feel like an expert on this board. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you, Red. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
In the interest of time, can we skip the next slide and go to the last one, please? Thank you. Awesome. So engaging in conversations work best when every voice is recognized, as we've said throughout this entire presentation. One way we do this is by supporting board members who serve as co-facilitators. So we have staff that remain neutral and unbiased in meetings, honoring the lived experience while handling logistics like slides, tech, chat, so everything runs smoothly. While co-facilitators really focus on the people in the room. They may open the meeting, lead icebreakers and guide discussions, and close with reflections. They encourage voices, balance airtime, and offer multiple ways to participate. So this role isn't about research expertise. It's about leadership, compassion, and lived experience. It's also about the opportunity to develop skills in facilitation and navigating conversations. And co-facilitators are compensated for extra preparation and responsibility. Together, this approach creates meetings that are organized, inclusive, and truly collaborative. So with that, Ren, from your perspective as a co-facilitator, what have you found most meaningful about helping to create a space where everyone feels heard?
So for that, I will need to touch on a little bit of my background as a first-generation student, where I've often felt kind of worried or insecure about the idea of me filling spaces where I feel I don't belong or I don't see people necessarily representing people who look like me. And having done the onboarding process to be on the community board, been on the community board and been able to participate and then later move forward and as well participate as a co-facilitator has been truly meaningful for me because despite knowing or not knowing what's going on in the thoughts of my other community board members, I want them to feel like they can also be in that similar role, especially if they've ever felt those feelings of insecurity in the past as well. And also just to know that their voice is valued as much as mine, as much as yours, Eden, and anyone else that discusses. Even if we all may say this similar things or whatever, everyone really does bring a different perspective, and we all have something to learn from each and every one, even if we all say the same thing or approach things similarly. So for me, that has been what's been most meaningful, is being that, showing that anyone can be in that role, and if that's what they would like.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Ren, for all your expertise and being amazing. And with that, I will go ahead and pass it on to Patrick.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eden, and for everybody presenting. There's a lot of information to include here, and y'all are just doing amazing. I have the pleasure of presenting with Jose Flores. I'll give you an opportunity to introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. How's everybody doing? Good afternoon. My name is Jose Nicolas Flores. I'm coming to you from Austin, Texas. I'm a person in long-term recovery from substance use and mental health challenges, and also have the lived experience of incarceration for several years here in our Texas Department of Criminal Justice. And yeah, just pleasure to be here with y'all today. A lot of the things, everything that's been said today has really made me reflect on like how long I've been doing this here with JEAP now, which has been a minute. So just happy to be here with y'all today.
Yeah, Jose's been with JEAP for quite a while. It's great to be here, y'all. I'll go quick on my introduction. I'm a research scientist at Chestnut Health Systems. I also come to the work with direct lived experience I'm in recovery from substance use disorder, and I also have a history, carceral history. We'll dive right in. In this section, you'll notice that a lot of the sections of this toolkit really overlap with each other, right? And I want to take a moment to encourage everybody to check out the toolkit. It's a really long document, but it's very approachable. And we did a lot of work with community board members and other folks trying to make sure that it's digestible. So we're going to talk a bit about engaging in research, engaging with community boards throughout the research process, bidirectional communication, meaningful connections, and evaluating that partnership. Let's go to the next slide. So the first thing we want to talk about, we're going to go a little bit out of order. And so the first thing to talk about is a bidirectional communication, right? Any relationship just kind of starts with having good communication, right? And we broke it down in the toolkit into a couple of different categories, starting with the short-term communication. It could be, people talked a lot about sort of pre and post materials. What does that look like? Also, just asking in meetings like, hey, I heard you say this. Am I hearing this correctly? Right? Trying to make sure that everything's going well, but then also having that space for other people to, community board members, everybody to speak up for clarity and ask questions. And then the midterm is more as materials are being developed, as research is being done, checking back in with community board members, making sure that that's working well. And then, the long term is more the finished product, right? It's a little bit less of a kind of a communication on like change this, but it's definitely sort of that last member checking, making sure that the work that you've all done together is being put together well. And Jose, I had a question for you about this process. It seems like, on our side, the research side, it's, we want to engage in this bidirectional communication, but we're only a part of the equation, right? How can we make sure that the bidirectional communication is working well for everyone involved?
That's a great question. Like I said in the intro, I'm just reflecting back on how I even started with JEAP, and this has been going on for like over 4 years now, I believe. And going in, I had already like participated in a lot of other research opportunities based around sharing some of my lived experience or things that I've done with certain populations and direct services. But it would be like a one-time meeting. I'd go through the interview, answer questions, and that would be it. I would never hear anything else. And so I wondered what the experience would be like with JEAP, right? Are they going to like communicate with me? Am I going to be really involved in the research that they're doing, especially like people like me? And it has been exactly that. There's been no shortage of meetings, Zoom meetings, emails, opportunities to provide post feedback. And that was important. And I think that's what's built up like such a trusting relationship. I think that's been the theme for a lot of, not just in the work that we just to be able to feel safe, right? And feel like there's trust and feel like we're appreciated and respected, that, that we're feeling like we're receiving dignity and, I don't know, that's been like super important. And then the long term, I think just being able to come back around and even let us know that like maybe, you know what, even this letter of support that you provided, it didn't necessarily come out the way we would have liked, but we appreciate you and thank you for taking the time to do that. Just things like that have been like really, really meaningful for me at least.
That's great. Good answer. Let's move on to the next slide. And we're going to kind of cover sustaining meaningful connections as well as engaging with community boards throughout the research process in the same slide. We talked a lot throughout this forum about kind of different ways to go about this, but this is kind of a broader perspective of making sure that everything, that the engagements are mutually beneficial, that, we have these meaningful connections. There's a bi-directional learning, that there's a trust built and we actually care about, and incorporate the feedback that's coming in. And then also the idea of, the community being involved throughout the research process has, in our experience at JEAP and, other projects that we worked on, has been crucial. You think about just the research ideas and like putting a project together, right? Or, putting in we're putting in applications for funding, right? Does this make sense to folks that are in the community? Is this really speaking about what the community needs, right? Implementing research, I'm a little bit removed now from, a lot of services. And so like, am I talking about ways to engage research service provider or treatment service providers in a way that would actually pan out, right? It's been a long time since I've been, I don't know, dealing with people in jails or carceral settings. They have tablets and now and stuff like we never had that stuff. How do we engage in that way, right? There's just so many different ways. And then also, obviously during the research and following up on materials, right? And so Jose, I wanted to talk a bit about the, engaging with the whole research process, because, as we talk about this stuff, what really occurs to me is we're asking a lot. Like there's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of potential for opportunity in this partnership, but at the same time, right, like we're pulling community members who have lives, they have families, they have things going on, right? Like how do we manage that in a way that's like meaningfully engaging with community members, but at the same time respecting the fact that this isn't their only gig?
Yeah, I think one of my fellow board members kind of talked about this a little bit about just, yes, I'm Jose, and yes, I come with this lived experience, and yes, I do this work, day in and day out, but like I'm a father, right? I'm a grad student. I'm a person that's still in recovery that faces challenges and sometimes can't take the time to, even find that, hour and a half to engage in one of our board meetings. But the one thing that has been helpful though is also a lot of times y'all might have not even known this, but I might have been struggling and going through a really hard time in life. But having that board meeting available to me to be able to engage with my other board members from across the country and hear about the great work they're doing or challenges they're facing was like very meaningful in that moment. And if I've never told you that, I'm telling you now, like I knew that, you know what, Jeep needs me today. That's helping me to get me up and engaged, right? Because at the end of the day, this wasn't even about me. It's about the community. And, and I believe that a lot of us are here because we want to be of service, right? And so that was like just that's why this has been like a great experience. I serve on other boards, but I always felt like y'all treated me as a person, and we're understanding also the times that I couldn't be present, but we're also appreciative of the times that I could be present.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jose. Let's go to the next slide. This will be our last one before we get to the Q&A. So everyone get those questions and comments and everything ready. I know you've just been waiting, chomping at the bit. We do want to talk about evaluating and adapting the partnership, right? And I'm a researcher. What I do is evaluate things, right? And when I come to a project like this, I generally think about like, I'm evaluating the research topic that I'm talking about, right? This is more talking about the partnership itself, right? Like, are you engaging in a meaningful way? How do we know, right? Like, it's important to have that, informed relationship with the community partners. We have some strategies here, and definitely in the toolkit. I'm not going to get too deep into those, but I did. Jose has had some experience through different partnerships, and you had mentioned before working with other community boards or other partnerships. Would you like to explain this, evaluating the partnership and what that's looked like in your experience?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it can be difficult sometimes to engage in this work, right? Especially when you're more at like the actual program, like direct service level, when you're trying to serve a population of folks that have been marginalized and trying to create access to services. And I think Ariel talked about it, where decisions were made without the feedback, right? Um, from people that are part of the team as well, and how that can create some difficulties in being able to engage with other folks and doing this work. And so it took us like bringing an outside entity to kind of do some evaluation and have some really hard discussions to remind us of like what we're doing, this why this work is so important. It's not even about us, it's about the people that we're serving. And but they, bringing in that outside entity to remind us, why we all came together years ago to do this was super important. And also creating that safe space, right, to have those difficult conversations, because we all have feelings, we all have emotions, right? But I think reminding ourselves why we came together to do this was like super important. Um, luckily, I feel fortunate that I don't feel like that ever happened with JEAP though, right? We were always, because we would have those moments post meeting to where we could just talk amongst ourselves, right? And if there were anything that we had more questions about or that didn't sit right with us, we were able to voice that with our fellow team members, and we'd have a representative to be able to bring that to y'all. And that felt safe. That felt comforting to be able to have that.
And you're looping back around to the bi-directional communication. Like I said, these are just so integrated within each other, y'all. So really encourage you to check out the toolkit. And with this, I'm going to pass it over to Ashley for our Q&A.
Well, I'll start with a huge round of applause for all the presenters. I feel like I even learned stuff, and I helped to write this toolkit, but I feel like I'm constantly learning, so I can't show enough appreciation for you all helping me along that journey. Let's start with any questions that you have for those of us who worked on the toolkit, including the board members who informed the toolkit. Any clarifications or any extensions or any questions about something that that was covered today? And I think we said that, and you can raise your hand, or you can send the questions to Keone if you want Keone to read it out instead. Well, I also, oh, Bridget, please, you have the floor.
I have a question about the sort of introduction to research materials you use with the board. Could you talk a little bit more about sort of what's included in that, and maybe how you kind of came to that?
Yeah, I'll jump in and then maybe I can turn it over to Eden to give a little bit more detail. I will say, Bridget, as it is with most of these things, it has evolved over time. And the way you asked the last part about how we came to that decision, a lot of it was by working with the board members that we have. So what we talk about in the toolkit is based on our lessons learned over time of getting feedback and continually trying to improve. So what we have in there as suggestions is it came from board members giving us that input. And I'll turn it over to Eden because she has a little bit better handle on the specifics.
Yeah, so we compiled a list of like specific videos, like Research 101 videos, just kind of giving the general overview of what research is, why research is important, and how research is conducted. And in our toolkit, you can refer to the chapter there, and it gives you some really nice examples of like what we try to do and how we try to kind of incorporate that. The idea is, again, I want to make sure I reiterate this, is that like we want everybody to be up to speed to be able to say, okay, yeah, we know what community-based participatory research is, but they don't have to feel like we have to go find 10 papers to figure out what that really is. And so just making sure you're explaining, why you're doing the work throughout the process and in order and getting them up to speed, and then continuously training on what that research process looks like. And if new research in processes come up, let them know, hey, we're doing this scoping review. Here's what a scoping review is and a little bit about how it's done. And then you can kind of move on from there. But yeah, definitely check out the toolkit. I'll get the chapters for you in the pages so you can see those examples.
And Ian mentioned sort of like when we bring new types of things like scoping reviews or things we haven't talked about before, one of the things we try to be particularly conscientious about is providing information in language that is easily digested. And so we do, that's usually a process. Even if we have external researchers come in to work with our board, our staff, who many of whom are individuals with direct and indirect lived experience, will sort of vet that material, and we'll try to rework it and work with the researchers to boil it down in a way where it is has enough information, but not sort of overwhelming. And we've also learned from our boards to include, if you want more information, because sometimes we've made it so basic that our board members were like, I want to dive in more and learn more. And we said, oh, we didn't want to burden you. So we also usually have additional materials for those who want to like deep dive on a particular topic as well. So those are some lessons learned.
And Bridget, last thing I just want to jump in and share before we hand it over to Keone is that sometimes we also reiterate, like even if we've trained you on what qualitative and quantitative is, we'll kind of, give a quick line about, hey, this is what qualitative research is and this is why we're doing it. So always constantly reminding folks, because they're not dealing with research every single day. And so, yeah, some of our members aren't, some of them are.
Keone.
All right, so we received an anonymous question. And before I get into it, just so that everyone knows how to use it, since sometimes different Zoom meetings have different settings, if you're looking at the chat, there's a section that says new chat. You can just click on that and type in my name, and that'll send it to me directly. So this anonymous question is, just wanted to send a question to ask for ways people can become involved to collaborate, especially if we do not have too much experience in this research method. I just don't have any, but I'd like to figure out ways to get more meaningfully involved.
Yeah, and I hope you go, Patrick.
No, I was going to jump in and say, we need people who aren't researchers. Like that's literally who we're looking for, right? And one of the puzzles that we have when we're trying to recruit folks is like, yeah, we don't want to end up in this echo chamber of researchers that are just talking the same, we need folks that aren't directly involved in research to come into projects. It's crucial that we have those perspectives. We do end up with folks that work in services and stuff like that, depending on what the topic is. But we also need folks that are like, if we're dealing with substance use and substance use recovery, we need somebody that's just like works a construction job. right? And we're like, we need all the different perspectives from the community so we can get that holistic perspective on what we're doing and make sure that it's useful to the most people in the community. So it's an incredibly important question.
Yeah. There was one question in the chat that had some relationship to this, and it was, how can you get involved in the current projects? I will say that JEAP is coming to its end in sunsetting as a project in the next 6 months or so as the JEAP initiative. Heal Connections that some of our panel members have been on, that project concluded a few months back. But Cheer is a project that is ongoing, and I'm going to put a link in the chat because Cheer is currently recruiting for some board openings, some openings that have come on the two boards. So there's information. There are specific requirements for that, or specific needs for types of experiences for those boards. So that's one. And I hope that if any folks are on the meeting and you're aware, or on the Zoom and you're aware of any other opportunities, please feel free to put those in the chat. We also try to get the word out whenever we hear about groups that are recruiting for board members as well. So we like to share that information as much as possible. Yeah, Keone, another question.
Okay, so we've received a couple submissions, so I'll just pick briefly for some of these. The first one being, how do you decide on the number of members for a project? Is 5 to 8 or 10 to 12 sufficient? Any guidelines on figuring out what's considered enough? And then as a follow-up for this person, any thoughts on having advisory panels that have different stakeholders? So thinking about people with lived history as well as clinicians. And is there any concern that they may not share as freely as others there?
Wondering for the second question of talking about the combination of different voices, if any of the co-presenters on the call who have been board members have any perspectives on that of, yeah, like if you have people who are like hospital administrators and folks who are like young adults in recovery, and if having, people kind of different, where they're in different points in their life together on a board, like that working well or not. Does anyone want to jump in on that question?
I just want to stress the importance of having to really know what community you want. Like, you just can't put people, someone mentioned this, you can't put people with lived experience and living experience necessarily, because it's a different experience. I feel like it's just super important to really, for me, I know the smaller groups always did better, I feel like, because it was more personable. We were able to get more of our words out, and I feel like to be heard more, versus like a little bit of a bigger panel where you might not always get that voice heard. I'm sorry if I didn't answer that.
No, that's great. Yeah, the one other thing I would add about the like different perspectives. So one example of something from our work that came up in a project is we were looking at family members and caregivers, and we were looking at like parents of folks who are in recovery or still actively struggling with substance use, or who have had a family member pass away from substance use. And we felt like those three different perspectives all together in one panel could be challenging, that what one group is sharing might be really triggering for another group. So we ended up narrowing the criteria a bit so that we didn't have all those perspectives all in one group together. So that could be one consideration of like, is it going to be problematic of what folks might be talking about in one group? On the size question, I would just add, I don't think there's, a perfect number. Once, I think the numbers, Keone, you had said was like 5 to 8 or 10 to 12 or something. I think if you're looking at like 5, then maybe, someone's out sick and someone has a work conflict and you have 3 people show up that day, and it starts to be kind of small. So, getting more towards like 8 or above might be helpful, just knowing that people have life and life happens, and it's not going to be every single person at every single meeting. So it's kind of a balancing act of that, and also budget and, how frequently you're meeting and stuff like that. But we've kind of gone a little bit on the higher end just so that we know we'll have like a good number of people there at each meeting.
And both of these topics are ones that we've done a little bit deeper dive in the toolkit about the size,
Yep.
like what are some some factors to think about when you're thinking about the size of your board, and then also for bringing together different groups is something we've also given some more details on. And with that, I will say it's important to go to the community that you're talking about, you know, and talk with folks about. So that's how we decided, you know, which types of caregivers to have together or not in a single panel. Why we have 3 community boards in JEAP. We have one that's young adults that are in recovery. We have one that is individuals that are in recovery and have that legal system history. And then we have one that's payers and providers of treatment service, recovery services for individuals who were either young adults or in the legal system, because we wanted to make sure that people's voices could be heard in each of those domains, but we also wanted enough sort of connection between the board members where they did have that safety and could hear one another on topics and feel free to speak up. So but we do go into some of that in more detail in the toolkit. Other questions that folks want to either add or also points that you think we haven't really focused on that you think are important for this audience to hear about? Laura.
Hi. I was wondering if there were times where you all felt like it was hard to get products out, or that something that I've struggled with is that we want all of our board members to be able to review all of our materials before they get put on our website, for example, or shared out. But then it seems like the process takes so long, and then we actually have so much information that we want to share, but like we get almost like bottled down in making sure everyone agrees that it's perfect to be shared out. So how have you all balanced that?
That's a great question. I don't know if any of the board members that we've worked with, because we did put out products, I don't know if anyone has any thoughts. I'm happy to jump in, but I feel like I'm always a speaker.
My mind went to the rapid feedback process, and maybe that's what you're thinking of, Ashley, but I don't know if Kim or Ariel, if you were doing that piece with Heal.
Well, I'm sorry, what was the initial question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it focused on when we have a board and we want to get sort of consensus on a final product, but the time that it takes to get everybody to sort of agree to exact wording and so forth on a final product, that sometimes it takes so much time that we can't get the products out.
So what usually I think is most helpful for me is just the organization level, like getting everyone on email and get everyone on the same page, and like maybe other people want to be more vocal and then other people don't want to be more vocal, and that's up to their discretion. But I just think organizing it and having set times and dates, like this is when we want this in, this is, and if they don't do it, then like they don't do it, then I know that's horrible and you want everyone's input, but sometimes I know for me, like there would be input, like some of us would have input on dissemination and what it would look like and the colors associated with it, and then others would have quotes in it. Like I feel like if everyone gets involved in some way, it eventually winds up working out as well.
Yeah, I think some tips that like come to mind are you might have sort of a subgroup that is sort of the main board members who are going to volunteer to run point on the final decision making. And so you might you do that everyone sort of agrees these 2 to 3 people are going to be sort of the final reviewers. Everyone has a chance to give input, but these 2 to 3 will make the final decisions. Another thought is just that we do is trying to give board members an advanced sort of heads up of, hey, we're going to have this product. We're going to have these 4 days where it's going to be open for input and guidance. and then we'll, close that. And so sort of giving a heads up where people can plan their time so that they do have time to review it during that portion. Another thing is we make sure because we always want to do that member checking of going back to the board to make sure before something goes out. But for us in JEAP, we've had to navigate this because we had 3 boards. So we can't go to one board and say, what you say today is going to be the final version, because we've got the 3 boards to sort of maneuver across. And so we always sort of explain that. And our job in going is that it's on us to go back to a particular board and say, hey, you gave this input. We weren't able to do it because of X, Y, and Z, because this board that has, deeper experience in that particular domain preferred this type of language. So we make sure that we try to make sure we circle back and provide that rationale for why we didn't take a particular board or board members' feedback. And then sometimes it's just there's a rapid process. And if there is a rapid process and we're not going to be able to do that sort of consensus building and member checking, then we're just open and honest about that from the very get-go. And we say, hey, we're going to do our best to incorporate everyone's feedback, but in the end, we're going to have to do this rapidly, and here's what's going on. Even then, we still do that circling back afterwards to make sure it's clear why we weren't able to take certain feedback. So those are some things off the top of my head. We have a part of the toolkit we reference where we built research priorities across all 3 boards. And we actually have a separate toolkit about that process because we did that early on in the JEAP initiative. And that gives some tips too about how we did that member checking process and sort of circling back in a way that didn't sort of bog it down so much. So perhaps that could be helpful, and we'll try to make sure we get that link in the chat as well. I think does that sort of conclude the amount of time we have available? All right, and I think I'm turning it back over to Patrick from here. But again, thank you everyone for your time, for being here today, for all of the input and guidance. And we're going to make sure that we get I see Eden's already put our email in the chat. If there are things where we can be helpful, or if there are places we should do better. If you read this toolkit and you see places where we can improve it, please circle back and let us know so that we can do that and share it with the field.
Yeah, absolutely.
All yours, Pat.
We always want to hear from you. I have the pleasure of this final sort of call to action, right? I'm going to ask a couple of board members, pretty broad question. We only have a short amount of time, but Ren, why does this work matter to you? Why do we even do this? Do I see Ren?
I'm right here. Hi.
Oh.
I love that question. This work matters to me. It's something I've actually been thinking about while we've been discussing, especially because someone mentioned what's something that we want the community to know. To me, it matters a lot for me to be here and to be a voice for especially my community when a lot of us may not have a voice in a lot of these spaces and may not be thought of, especially with the current climate in the nation and stigmas and stereotypes being thrown around. I think it's important for people to hear and to understand that we're human and we also go through these types of things. And I don't think that there's a lot of emphasis or focus on different communities aside from mine who are also affected by substance use and who may not be able to access resources and care the way that they need, which then later on leads to further damage and then further suffering. So to me, it's super important for me to be an advocate for people like me and people within my family that are like me, because I always think like, if I don't do it, then where am I going to pass the torch, So I feel extremely grateful and honored to be a part of this and to also have everyone here and show that they care. So I really appreciate it. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, we appreciate you. Jose. Same question. Why? Why is this important?
Ren mentioned it, having a voice. I mean, I spent 8 years in solitary confinement out of the 13 years that I was locked up, and as a kid too, and I didn't have a voice back there. I had to like, keep that voice in my head saying to hopefully allow me to be able to return back to society one day, to be able to participate in even things like this. And believe me, I never thought I'd be in spaces like this, but that I am, I'm like truly grateful for it, because at the end of the day, I'm like speaking for people that I left behind, right? That are still incarcerated. Because finally our Texas Department of Criminal Justice recognizing that substance use is happening within their facility. So making sure that the same way that people can receive care out here, that they can receive it behind bars as well, and that it's trauma informed as well. And so, I mean, that's why I do this work. Everything that all the research that y'all were doing, a lot of it aligned with like the current work that I'm doing, especially around the opioid use disorder, here in Texas. And so I was just grateful to have an opportunity to be able to participate in it, because JEAP is ending, the Justice Involved Community Board is ending, but it was just amazing to work with folks from all across the country and just hear the great things that they're doing. Because that was important for me, to know that like, even though Texas is a big state, like I know that even the most rural communities are being affected, and just places all across the country. So, I mean, getting to meet y'all as well, being able to meet Ashley in person at a conference was like one of my best memories too. And, it was just meaningful at the end of the day. And that's the things that I like to be a part of that are fulfilling to me.
That's great. And Ashley, we got a quick outro. I think we got a poll.
Yeah, we have a
Or
quick
is it
poll.
you?
It's okay. We have a quick poll for y'all. Thank you all for joining us today. If you could just take a second, we're going to launch that poll right now. I don't know if you can see it on your screen, but we really do appreciate you all being here today. Special thank you to Ren, Kim, Jose, Ariel. I mean, this work would not be able to be done without you, and we are so grateful. Please stay tuned. In January, we're going to have a forum on emerging adults and families. And we really appreciate you coming around, and all of the participants who came and sat with us today. Check out the toolkit. It's really helpful. And with that, I hope you all have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.